When I say the word addicted, you probably associate that with something negative. The common definition for most people, weakness. You're giving something else control over your life. You're making the choice to do that, and if you can't change it, well, you must be weak. Sound familiar? Living with addiction isn't a life any of us would choose, but yet it is changing the face of our society through the opioid crisis. Now, before you say I'm not a drug addict, it doesn't impact me, I gotta tell you, you're wrong. Over the next hour, you will hear how it's impacting your taxes, your health care, and your neighbors. The dominoes continue to fall, one after another, creating new problems we never knew could come from a drug. We're gonna show you ways to help those who need it and where they can find that help. We begin with one woman who finds herself surrounded by addiction every day as she fights to change that outside perception of weakness. Shay McAllister introduces us to Tiny.
You see heroin.
In the end, it controls you.
I see low self-esteem. You see track marks. I see depression.
It's the mental pain that hurts the worst.
You see a junkie. I see someone's son.
I'm hurt now. Believe in that. I'm hurt.
You see a prostitute. I see someone's daughter caught in addiction.
First thing I do in the morning is thank God for waking me up.
You see self-centeredness. I see the disease.
I put everybody in danger around my family. I put them all in pain when I do it. This ain't fun no more.
I'm Tiny Heron Markwell. When I was born, my dad was a preacher of a little church down here on 2nd and College Street. Never really had a large congregation, but the doors were always open. There was always people coming through the doors of the church that needed clothing or food. From a really early age, I learned what addiction was and what prostitution was, but I was taught to love them and not shun them.
Known as Tiny, her heart is huge.
I always tell people, I'm like, once your eyes are open to this need, you're not gonna be able to shut it off.
She was first to find those living on the street and meet them where they're at.
If you are wanting to change, you let me know. That's on you.
She founded the Forgotten Louisville 14 years ago.
I called it the Forgotten Louisville because we are a city full of resources. We have lots of resources for the homeless. We have lots of resources for substance use disorder, but for whatever reason, they don't get tapped into like they should.
When she started, dealing with addiction was different.
So when I first started doing outreach, the biggest problem that I saw here, anything with addiction, was mostly alcoholism.
Now, drugs dominate the population she serves to save.
I always stop and say, we're gonna do pulse checks. And I just stop and make sure I get a response.
Narcan, a necessity.
All of us carry Narcan now, just because we come upon an overdose. That's not uncommon that we see that.
Just one dose can bring users back from the dead.
When someone is new to the streets and you know what's out here, and it's like you want to swoop them up as fast as you can before the streets eat them alive. Because 9 times out of 10, they're going to get offered some drugs, or they're going to get approached to sell or be the mule or the middleman. And we see that happen a lot too.
We're on our way back to M Street right now, which is an area that Tiny, our homeless outreach volunteer, serves often.
Tiny took our team to a corner of town with a reputation.
Heavy drug use, prostitution, trafficking, homelessness, domestic violence, and lack of services.
We walked the streets with her. We wanted to see what she saw.
As broken and as hopeless as this little area seems, they look out for each other.
Nestled in a neighborhood between Churchill Downs and U of L, M Street is home to dozens of homeless.
It has a reputation to be riddled with drugs, so I don't know if that keeps people away from the area. But for our team, that's a draw into the area because we want to get in there and do what we can. And there's areas like this all over the city.
Here, she introduced us to Jennifer.
I used to shoot up, as you can see. I used to shoot heroin.
Jennifer is 5 years sober.
It's been hard because, you know, there's a lot of drugs around here. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of heroin that goes around here, and there's a lot of people dying from it, and it's really, really sad.
She still struggles to find stability. She and her fiance are homeless.
We come up here, we pitch our tent, we make our beds for the night, we go to sleep, we get up the next morning, I come in here, I start my job at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm here till 1. My fiance goes to work at 1. And he comes home, he helps me do what I gotta do, start over the next day. That's all we can do. Just take it slow day by day.
Is it difficult to stay away from heroin when it surrounds you?
You just have to have the willpower. I think it's all about the willpower, and you have to have the willpower to change.
But the choice to change can be hard to make.
If I'm not ready to put it down, I'm not going to.
And on these streets, buying is easier than ever.
If you want drugs, believe if a junkie wants drugs, they're gonna get them. I ain't gonna lie, I probably spend about $40, $45 a day on it. And how I get my money, panhandle, fly sign, however I can, you know what I'm saying? It's, you know, other people supporting our habits because I'm not gonna say we're junkies, but we're addicts, you know what I'm saying? Robberies, tricking, I mean, it doesn't matter. It will make you do anything. It'll make you rob your grandmother.
Everyone here has a story.
You know, it's survival of the fittest out here. It's every man for himself out here.
A beginning.
I got shot in my face when I was 12, and I had to take migraine medicine. And when you're pregnant, you can't take migraine medicine, so he had to give me pain pills. One day I couldn't stand none, and I asked my cousin, what does heroin make you feel like? She said like 10 Loratadine, and that's all she had to tell me.
A middle.
I've been a drug addict for 17 years. I watched my mom pass away. I watched my dad pass away from alcohol. I'm slowly watching my friends pass away too.
And an end.
Most people that do heroin, they want that relaxation feel, they want that painkiller feel. They nod you out, they make you sleep, forget about it.
We toss people aside too easy without seeing the human being behind the mask. And lots of times with addiction, you're masking something.
You're okay.
Some are masking the past.
Just relax, hey.
Yeah, I don't like dealing with pain, and that's the way for me to cover it up is with drugs.
Others are masking the fear.
I just can't put myself through a sitting in a waiting room for 5 hours, just getting sick. I'm scared of the withdrawal.
Sometimes, masking is easier than facing the future.
So what I'm doing now is I'm digging a hole so damn deep, man, but I'm crawling up out of it, so all right.
But a path to progress isn't a straight shot. So Tiny's team turns to something else.
I think this time I got 100.
Harm reduction.
Some people don't feel okay about harm reduction. Harm reduction to me is supporting the needle exchange program and talking about using together, don't use alone, and do you have Narcan, and do you know how to administer Narcan? That does not mean I'm saying go get high. That is me saying I accept you as you are. You've shared with me what your struggles are. Let me give you some tips on at least how to be safe if you choose to do this.
And the reality is people do choose to do it. So Tiny and her team just try to keep them safe.
I've registered for the needle exchange myself, and I go in there and they ask me how many times a day I shoot up, and I tell them 15 times a day so that I can bring clean needles out here for these guys to access.
This volunteer is years into her own sobriety, but she remembers using with a dirty needle.
That was one of the last things that I did was dig through a garbage can of a house of people that I knew were shooting dope and get a dirty needle out of their garbage can. I ran bathroom cleaner through it because I thought that would kill all the infection. Sharpened it on the concrete and shot it with it.
It's the dirty reality, and sometimes it's followed by a realization, the one Tiny waits for, wanting to hear those words, hoping someone asks for help.
Because when somebody comes to you and says, I want help now, you've got to act now. You have to act now.
Tiny takes people to detox. She finds them sober living solutions. She follows them through the process. She fights for their future.
You're not forgotten. You are loved.
She fights for Todd.
So Todd is my husband.
Tiny and Todd shared a love story like the ones you read about.
And he and I we had a connection from the minute. And I just stuck it out with him, and you know, that was my best bud. We did everything together, like complete each other's sentences, soulmates, like we love the same type of people, we love the same way. We had just gotten married in August. Like we were in the best time of our life. He had a great job. So it rocked my world in a way that you can't even put it into words.
Todd was a recovering addict. He had 5 years of sobriety. He also had back pain. And at the end of last year, a doctor sent him home with prescription drugs.
I wasn't ignorant to the fact that it could happen. I always lived on high alert, but I had just gotten very comfortable as well, thinking, you know, we've got 5 years under our belt. It's in the professional world, working within this field, working with this population.
In December of 2018, Todd relapsed.
Horrible. Horrible.
3 days before Christmas.
I had plans to go visit with family for Christmas, and I did a phone call. I was about 45 minutes outside of Louisville that his mother had found him.
Todd did what's called a test shot of heroin. Tiny says his autopsy showed that test shot was all fentanyl.
I was describing grief the other day as like being in an ocean. Like I can do fine and walk out in the ocean, the waves hit me and I'm fine. Then other days I'm out there and they'll just knock me down.
Todd's memory lives on through Tiny's touch.
There is so much shame and guilt with the stigma of addiction that people are afraid to talk about it. And I didn't dare want my husband's legacy or life to be tarnished that way. He was a beautiful soul that loved people, that would give the shirt off of his back. He's my guardian angel now.
His memory, her mission.
You see the end, I see the beginning.
Their battle.
You see a dope fiend, I see a future success story.
Our war.
You see them and I see me.
Tiny sees addiction every day on the streets of Louisville. But it turns out the ones that we turn to treat it are also victims themselves. More than 100,000 doctors, nurses, and medical technicians are struggling with opioid abuse or addiction. Access is easy for those in the medical field, as simple as calling a pharmacy to get your prescription fix. Long shifts, high-stress work environments, and the ability to get practically any drug you want at any time has led to 1 in 10 doctors falling into drug or alcohol abuse at some point in their lives. Yes, the helpers need help too. And they're getting it. 71% of doctors who are treated for their addiction have a far lower rate of relapse, with 71% still sober, licensed, and employed after 5 years. Now, you may be thinking that no one in my family is addicted to opioids. This doesn't impact me, but you're wrong. The Focus team looks at how every taxpayer is digging deeper in their wallets every year. This is an ongoing conversation, so be sure to join us on Facebook Live. The Focus team is answering your questions and listening to your stories. even if you don't know anyone personally suffering from an opioid dependency, you are impacted. Nationally, the cost to taxpayers is already in the billions, and here at home, it's adding up. Chris Williams offers perspective.
Think you're not impacted by this crisis? Think again. Even if the staggering number of Kentuckians and Hoosiers killed every year alone is not enough to get your attention, wait until you see how much it's costing even those with no connection to someone using or killed by overdose. You've seen 737 passenger jets. They hold about 150 people, including crew. In 2017, Kentucky lost the equivalent of nearly 8 737s. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, 1,160 people died of opioid abuse. Indiana doesn't single out opioids in their drug abuse death stats, but their total 2017 age-adjusted deaths credited to drug abuse was 1,852 people, and that's 12 1/3 737s. When someone dies, people often ask the question, what if someone hadn't died? What accomplishments don't we know about? What major contributions did they not make? Families of those lost in this crisis struggle with those heartbreaking questions every day. Even for those living with addiction, there's a fair question. What is our society missing out on because of their absence? It's costing every Kentuckian $205 per year, every Hoosier $188 per year, according to a study by AEI, a policy think tank that calculated the cost to the criminal justice system, the healthcare system, and loss of productivity alone. In Kentucky, a state struggling with a pension debt crisis, precious resources have been pouring in to save lives that could be going to retirements. The executive director of Office of Drug Control Policy says $74 million has gone to helping them fund the fight in the past 2 state budgets. The feds have kicked in another $50 million. A large chunk of that funding goes to the life-saving drug Narcan. In 2018 alone, the Kentucky Agency for Substance Abuse Policy spent 30% of its budget on Narcan kits. The executive director told me that amounts to about $330,000. And here's why that money and more is needed. In 2017, Kentucky providers wrote 86.8 opioid prescriptions for every 100 Kentuckians. Indiana wasn't far behind at 74.2 opioid prescriptions for every 100 Hoosiers. Both of the states were well ahead of the national average, which is alarming. 58.7 opioid prescriptions were written for every 100 Americans.
There are many times that the help an addict needs is right at their fingertips, but the cost is out of reach. Despite insurance options, it can be a heavy burden. The Focus team uncovers a wide range of expenses that can bankrupt any family, and those wondering if the cost to be clean is worth the price you pay. And join the conversation on Facebook Live. Our Focus team is getting answers to questions that you may have if you or a loved one is dealing with addiction. The road to recovery often begins with a person needing help. They may need help, but they also have to want it. That's the first obstacle of many others that can follow. John Charlton here now with the cost of addiction.
13 years on the wrong road, always headed the wrong way. That's a lot of wear and tear. There's no quick fix for that.
But you know, what can I do about it?
Especially when a fix is all he wanted.
Right.
All he cared about every single day. This is the job.
I am the shuttle driver for James Collins Downtown Ford dealership.
One that he needed for more than just the money.
Routine is everything.
It's helping to save this 34-year-old's life.
You got to fill your time with positive things. Because before, my time was filled with negative things and self-destructive things.
So how did he arrive here? What did he have to leave behind to finally get to a good place? To walk away from it all and save himself from himself.
My name's Michael Walsh, and I've been sober for 2 years and 3 months.
Walsh went from painkillers.
But that's how it started.
To hooked on heroin.
Did you feel like when you tried heroin the first time it was an all-time low for you?
At that point, I wasn't feeling much of anything. I remember kind of thinking, man, I just used heroin. At that point, I was willing to try anything to feel better. When I got to that point, I was already hopeless anyways.
Because prior to those 3 years of using,
The only thing I ever did with heroin was snort it. I was scared to shoot it.
Walsh actually tried to get help to break his bad habit of popping pills. It was always the right time to detox, even though he didn't get the time he needed.
The first time I went, I got to stay for 7 days, and my insurance, that's all they allowed me to stay. So it was supposed to be like a 28-day program, so I only got to stay 7 days, and I was back out after that.
What if you paid out of pocket?
It was way too expensive for out of pocket. I can't remember the exact price, but those places are not cheap.
Without insurance, costs can be upwards of $500 to $700 per day for inpatient rehab. After calling the 32 facilities in the Louisville area, not all would answer our questions, but from the ones which did, Focus found there's a wide range of expenses for a wide range of services. Where one is $290 per outpatient visit, another costs $20 per group session. And where one offers 2 years of counseling for $9,000, another provides the anti-relapse drug Vivitrol for $1,300 a pop.
The state is expanding care availability across the board.
With a state match of $30 million in federal funding, Kentucky Health Commissioner Dr. Jeffrey Howard says outside of immediate help, there must be and will be more of an emphasis on transitional help.
Once those folks are clean, can we transition them to outpatient regimens once they're not acutely addicted? We have to support the post-recovery, post-inpatient treatment aspect of care to the utmost.
At one place, the Healing Place.
We're completely free.
There's no need to pay to stay, thanks to donations, Section 8 eligibility, and funding from Metro Corrections.
You'll help people from Indiana as well?
We have, yes. Yes. Plus, we also have the luxury of having a 100-bed center in Campbellsville.
With a recent expansion, the Healing Place has almost 800 beds across 3 campuses, saying now with more capacity, it hasn't had to turn anyone away.
The Healing Place is a 6 to 9 month recovery model based on behavior modification to put them in the best possible position for long-term recovery, because that's our job.
Michael Walsh.
There were days where I didn't care if I woke up.
Didn't go to the Healing Place.
I was blessed enough to go through a transitional living facility called the Beacon House.
A judge ordered him to either this house or it's the big house. While he doesn't live here anymore, Walsh visits regularly.
I think John could use your guidance.
Mentoring a few guys going through what he went through.
You know, it's a very important part of our process to stay sober is to reach back and help. I just tell them that there's hope, you know, that, you know, you can have a different life that you may not have known existed, but you have to follow the rules. You have to do the things that the people that are successful in living sober lives, that you have to do the things that they do.
Walsh points out to live here, you got to get a job. Then you pay $105 per week.
Basically, this is, you know, a 6-month program, but really it can be longer than that.
For Walsh, in the end, that was about $4,600.
I mean, it does take time.
At Beacon House, there's light at the end of the tunnel, but not everyone sees it. These guys in the gym admit they've relapsed a few times. Sadly, so did a couple of Walsh's former roommates here.
It wasn't very long after they left this house that, you know, we got the news that they had OD'd and passed away. When it happens, don't let it, you know, be the end of your story.
2 years and 3 months sober. It's Michael Walsh's new beginning.
The path to success has already been laid out before us. You know, we just have to follow it.
America's addiction to painkillers appears to be waning, at least in some states. According to the American Medical Association, last year doctors wrote 33% less prescriptions for opioids compared to 2013. But when it comes to Kentucky and Indiana, we still lead the country in the number of prescriptions for opioids. The CDC says in 2017, Kentucky shelled out 86.8 prescriptions for opioids per 100 people. For Indiana, 74.2. And while those numbers still put us in the top 10 states in the country with the most prescribed opioids, it's actually a huge drop for us. In 2011, Kentucky was handing out more than 137 opioid prescriptions per 100 people. In Indiana, 106. Doctors are obviously making progress, but these high numbers suggest the starting point for the crisis we're in now. Leading the charge in the Commonwealth's crusade against addiction is the State Health Commissioner. And for Dr. Jeffrey Howard, it's personal. In his own words, he shares how a loss of parental control, that is, parents who lost control over drugs, made him the man that he is today.
But no Kentuckian is more than once removed from substance use disorder and its far-reaching effects, and I'm no different. See, I grew up in very rural Appalachian Kentucky with parents, my mother and stepfather, both were addicted to drugs, particularly the infamous drug, Oxycontin. We moved from trailer park to trailer park. In fact, by the time I was in 3rd grade, I'd attended 5 different elementary schools. I remember sometime coming home and our mother was incapacitated and was unable to care for my little sister and me. I remember worrying about whether we would have running water or electricity or food sometimes. But that story's not unique to me. There's thousands of kids in Kentucky going through that same issue. And that's what motivated me to become a physician. That's what motivated me to take this position and lead our state's public health system.
The struggle of addiction can be a lifelong process, and somewhere along the way, the odds of winding up in jail are pretty high. We take a look at what it's like to live addicted behind bars and the controversial treatment that some say is setting addicts up for an even tougher life on the outside. This is an ongoing conversation, so be sure to join us on Facebook Live. The Focus team is answering your questions and listening to your stories. So let's take some steps back. How do opioids really impact the body and cause addiction? When it comes to addiction, the body says you don't have a choice of whether you want to use. Your brain is telling you that you need to use. People in the throes of addiction will give up everything in their lives just because their brain is telling them you only need this to survive. Heather Fountaine takes a look at how that desperation can lead addicts to a jail cell.
And my face went through the windshield, the truck flipped over. For the first time, I was handed a bottle of painkillers.
James Sweezy was 21 years old. Suddenly, nothing else mattered.
The painkillers came before everything else in my life.
In his decade of addiction, James played tag with police, arrested, bonded out again and again, until a DUI cost him 72 hours behind bars.
I wasn't able to take anything, and the withdrawal symptoms kicked in.
Sweezy wasn't alone. Metro Corrections Assistant Director Steve Durham says 30,000 people go through the jail every year. Nearly 10,000 go straight to detox.
Any given day, between 40, 60, 80, sometimes as much as 120 individuals that are going through withdrawal here in Metro Corrections.
It's a pain.
Imagine the worst flu you've ever had times 10.
This jail is trying to take away.
Medication-assisted treatment, along with counseling and recovery, is the gold standard.
Medication-assisted treatment, or methadone. A red liquid and an opioid itself, taken like cough syrup.
The medication does help to reduce the withdrawal symptoms that people have so that they don't experience that severe withdrawal.
This is a pathway for us. Individuals coming to us, kind of a captured audience, and we have an opportunity to offer them an opportunity to change the way their life is going.
The jail already administers methadone to women locked up and pregnant, but a program announced in May would extend the treatment to other inmates.
You know, very quickly into the planning stage, we'll be finding ways to identify individuals who can best benefit from medication-assisted treatment.
Treatment that, for some, is controversial.
What's the process to determine if someone qualifies? So how are they, assessing? What's the follow-up looks like?
Henry Lucas is a therapist who worked with thousands in recovery after his own journey to sobriety.
Medication isn't the only treatment. Again, it's going to decrease and maybe bring some comfort to the physiological symptoms, right? But it's not the end-all, be-all.
James tried methadone as a treatment.
I think it can be a good thing, but they're playing with fire.
And remembers the withdrawal was worse than any other opioid. An advocate for abstinence that worries about after incarceration, a costly $12 a day for a dose at local clinics.
What happens when their feet hits the streets? Where is the off-ramp?
Dr. Lori Kaloya with the Department of Public Health and Wellness says it depends on each person.
Does there have to be an off-ramp necessarily? I think there are some people who believe that absolutely the ultimate goal is to have people be abstinent and not use any drugs at all, but I think that we are finding that that is not necessarily the case across the board.
Henry believes long-term treatment is necessary no matter what, but success is subjective.
If they say, well, I'm on methadone and I haven't used heroin, if that's what their goal was, is to not use heroin, then I'd say that would be a success for them.
James chooses abstinence, clean and sober for 6 years, and hopes others will be able to get there too, one way or another.
Is it a bad idea to put these people on in jail, to put them on something that could protect them? I don't think so. I think it's something that's going to require a lot of the jail listening to the recovery community.
While addicts are usually safe from an overdose under the watchful eye of a detention center, it's not the same on the outside. Overdoses continue to overload emergency resources. Most of the time, those sirens you hear from ambulances racing through the city streets, they're actually responding to someone on the verge of dying from drugs. John Charlton here again with a bit of positive news when it comes to emergency response.
If they weren't busy, they wouldn't be helping Louisville. Runs are recurring for Metro Emergency Services, with the recurring emergency being overdoses.
And we gave you some medicine that only works with opiates, and then you woke up.
That was Major Chris Lockett 2 years ago.
You were unconscious in the car.
This is him today.
We certainly still respond to them on a daily basis.
While the job hasn't changed, there has been some change for the better.
It's trending downwards.
When comparing the first 3 months of last year to the first quarter of this year.
Probably around 25 to 40 cases less.
That's 25 to 40 less per month. Major Lockett points out that deadly highs are also down. Overdoses reversed with naloxone.
He's still not breathing on his own, so I'm giving him 2.
Generally referred to by the brand name Narcan.
It's vitally important.
A necessary expense, still accounting for much of the EMS budget.
If you don't give an overdose victim Narcan and manage their airway, you ventilate them, provide them oxygen, they will become a cardiac arrest.
The heroes and heroines fighting heroin, even though many of those needing saving.
There's one patient that had 13 encounters.
Are often the same.
Does it get frustrating after a while to see the same face every time and reviving that person?
Sure, it definitely can get frustrating. Every encounter is an opportunity, and that could be the time that they, make that change and turn their life around and kick the habit, so to speak, or, decide that they want to get help.
Second chances, often needing third, fourth, or even more chances.
They are the most innocent among us. Babies born fighting for their lives, how hospitals are helping children born addicted. And join the conversation on Facebook Live. Our focus team is getting answers to questions that you may have if you or a loved one is dealing with addiction. It's one thing for a person to harm themselves with their addiction, but what happens when they pass that addiction on to an innocent child? Pregnant women addicted to opioids are passing that physical need for the drug on to their babies. And when those babies are born, they suffer, physically suffer. But not alone. Meet one woman who is doing everything that she can to help these babies heal from addiction in just the first few weeks of their lives.
You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay.
They call her the baby whisperer.
Yeah. I promise you're going to be okay.
In the neonatal unit at Norton Children's Hospital, Sharon Benton spends every Wednesday rocking the pain away for sick and suffering newborns.
It's just a wonderful way of touching children's lives who will never know you touched them, but that you can love and love and love and help them as they work through this illness to be able to become whole.
In some cases, that illness is withdrawal.
And we have seen an explosion in our babies who are going through what we call neonatal abstinence syndrome or withdrawal from even just 10 years ago.
Dr. Seth Schultz, a neonatologist and associate professor of pediatrics at U of L, says last year in Kentucky, more than 1,000 babies were born addicted to opioids, 10 to 20 each month at Norton Children's Hospital. Much like their mothers, these newborns find themselves in severe withdrawal without the fix they're accustomed to in the womb.
Babies can have a wide variety of different symptoms. A lot depends on the medication or the drug that mom was using. But they can have problems with their sleep cycle. They can be very irritable. They can have feeding difficulties and GI difficulties. And then babies can get really sick, so they can have problems with their breathing and even things like seizures that need to be cared for.
And the troubles don't end after withdrawal is over. Many will remain at a high risk for addiction into adulthood. That's the hard part for Sharon, not knowing what kind of lives these babies will live beyond the safety of the neonatal unit. Even still, Sharon says she does not hold any mother responsible for her child's withdrawal.
More feeling sorry for mothers and what they're missing out on in terms of their babies being so young, and they're probably at a point or a stage in their life where they can't really love or care as much as they would like to or can because of the addiction. And so I mostly pray for them and pray for these little ones that hopefully they will be able to fight that addiction. I know it's a tough thing in our society right now, and will continue to be probably until we find ways of working with it and curing it maybe, or doing something.
Police departments across the country are changing their approach when it comes to dealing with opioids. Realizing they couldn't arrest their way out of the problem, they've become a safe haven for those needing help. The Angel program allows drug users to come to police for help getting into treatment. Officers were witnessing the skyrocketing number of overdose deaths, along with a dramatic increase in crime. But oftentimes, police officers found themselves arresting the same people over and over again. With that, the conversation changed about law enforcement's role in dealing with opioid use. They decided change the approach, stop the cycle.
We'd make every attempt to try to get people into a treatment resource in lieu of having to go back down the same roads that they've always been down inside of the criminal justice system, because we want people to get to the end, that they don't have to go down those roads again, that they can have those access to recovery that they weren't able to get to before.
The Angel program launched in Kentucky at the Jeffersontown Police Department in 2016. It's now being implemented in several departments across the Commonwealth, including the Kentucky State Police. If you or a family member need help, you can always reach out to your state or local police department. Families are affected all across the country. Parents dealing with children addicted to opioids. Their story in their own words. This is an ongoing conversation, so be sure to join us on Facebook Live. The Focus team is answering your questions and listening to your stories. If there's breath, there's hope. And with support, there's joy. The proof is across Louisville. Nar-Anon is an anonymous support group for families of addicts. What began as just one meeting a week has now turned into 4, with more and more people being affected. Cameras usually aren't allowed inside these meetings, but tonight, a glimpse at how it's changing lives.
You can't imagine what it's like until you've lived it.
There's so many emotions, there's so many disappointments, there's so many hopes that disappear. I just can't do it. And so, but inside these rooms, every single person understands what that's like.
To lose yourself while trying to save another.
Heroin in particular was my family member's drug of choice.
Started out meth, turned into heroin.
There's times that they consume everything about you. Your time, your thought, your money.
You forget about the things in life that are enjoyable and the things in life that you deserve.
I just felt so helpless.
A roller coaster ride that never ends, soaking in the moments when their loved ones are sober, fearing the days when they're not.
It's a nightmare for the person using, and it's a nightmare for the people around them.
It's like you're grieving a death that hasn't happened yet.
You do have that reality. You know, the next phone call could be that they've died.
That's the insanity that a lot of us live.
A burden far too heavy to carry alone. That's where Nar-Anon comes in.
The first night it was just unbelievable because it was like a weight lifted off of my shoulders.
This program teaches us how to detach from all of that and to learn how to get our lives back.
I just want people to know that we're here, you know, and we understand.
And they don't give advice. It's not the purpose of the support. The purpose of the support is sometimes we just need to talk through it ourselves.
Some are more outspoken than others, and that's okay.
The first year, I didn't talk. I didn't say one word. I just sat and listened.
All of a sudden, my loved one is the one living down under that bridge that all these people talk about. I was obsessed with trying to save her, but realized that I couldn't. And I needed the wisdom of the other people in these meetings that had experienced this before to help me figure out how to survive it.
Working the 12 steps has allowed me to release my addict and realize I can't control it, I can't cure it.
But they can find peace and help others in the process.
Sometimes, if you're dealing with active addiction, it's an hour you look forward to out of the whole week. Because you can smile, you can talk, you can listen, you can learn.
Addiction sucks, but this fellowship is, there's joy here.
There's hope.
Staying sober can be a lifelong struggle, and some users need help finding a reason to stop before it's too late. There are resources across Kentucky and Indiana to help families who are dealing with this chronic illness. There are people, some of them volunteers, who make it their life's work to help people get sober and stay in recovery. The hope being that one day, no family will have to deal with the unbearable pain of losing a loved one to addiction. They're ready. They're ready to help you take your life back. We have a comprehensive and detailed list of just some of the resources available. You can find them on our website and on our app. Long-term recovery and community, they're the common thread to help those living with addiction. Don't forget to join us as we continue the conversation right now on Facebook Live. We hope the stories we shared with you this hour will help you understand the magnitude of the opioid crisis. We didn't get here alone. And it will take all of us to rebuild our communities free from the bounds of addiction. It can be done. It must be done. Thanks for watching. For Focus, I'm Lisa Hudson.
If you're alive, there is hope.
If you're alive, there's hope.
If you are alive, there's hope.
If you are alive, there's hope.
If you're alive, there's hope.
If I'm alive and I'm doing this thing, then there's definitely hope.